The rain in Moscow always felt heavier when it mixed with the tears I refused to let fall. I stood under the dripping awning of the glass tower on Tverskaya Street, my coat soaked through, watching the man I had once loved more than my own breath being turned away from the building that bore his name in gold letters above the revolving doors. Dmitry Volkov, single father, founder of Volkov Dynamics. And tonight, according to the security guards who blocked his path, a stranger in his own empire. I had not planned to be there. I had only come because my sister Anastasia worked the night shift in the legal department and had called me in a panic, her voice cracking over the phone. "Katya, something is wrong. They won't let him in. They're saying the board voted him out. Come now." So I came. I always came when someone needed me. That was the curse and the blessing of being Ekaterina Petrova, the woman who could never walk away from a heart breaking in front of her. Dmitry's shoulders were rigid under his dark coat. Rain plastered his black hair to his forehead. In one hand, he held a small blue backpack that belonged to his 7-year-old daughter, Masha. In the other, a crumpled printout. I knew what it was without seeing the words. The same cold legal language that had once protected him now sealed the doors against him. "Sir, you are no longer authorized," the older guard repeated, eyes fixed somewhere past Dmitry's face. "Board resolution effective immediately. Please step back." Dmitry's voice was quiet, the way it always became when the world tried to crush him. "This is my company. I built every floor of this building. My daughter's drawings are still on the walls of the executive suite. Let me through." The younger guard shifted uncomfortably. "We have orders, Mr. Volkov." "From Mr. Sokolov." Sokolov. The name hit me like a fist. Ivan Sokolov, the smooth-talking investor Dmitry had trusted too quickly after his wife's death 3 years earlier. The man who had smiled at the funeral, offered capital, and slowly, quietly, rearranged the board until the founder became a minority voice. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. "Dmitry." He turned. For a second the rain and the city noise disappeared. His eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once looked at me across a university lecture hall and made me forget every careful plan I had for my life, found mine. Recognition flared. Then something deeper, something that still lived under the years of silence between us. "Katya," he said, and the single word carried every winter we had spent apart. I moved to stand beside him. The guard stiffened. "Miss, this is a private matter." "It is not private when the man who employs half of you is being treated like a thief on the street," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. "I am Ekaterina Petrova, senior counsel at Orlov and Partners. I represent Mr. Volkov's personal interests. You will allow us inside, or I will have a court order here within the hour that freezes every asset this building sits on." It was a bluff. A beautiful, necessary bluff. I had no such order. But the older guard hesitated long enough for Dmitry to meet my gaze again. Something like gratitude and old pain passed between us. Inside the lobby the air was too warm, too clean. The marble floors reflected the crystal chandeliers Dmitry had chosen himself the year Masha was born, when he still believed the world could be beautiful after loss. Employees lingered near the elevators, whispering. Some looked away. Others stared with open curiosity or quiet shame. Dmitry walked straight to the reception desk. The young woman behind it, Lena, had once brought homemade pierogi to the office when Masha was sick. Tonight her hands shook as she dialed the executive floor. "Mr. Sokolov is expecting you," she whispered, not meeting Dmitry's eyes. The elevator ride felt endless. Dmitry stood rigid, the little backpack still clutched in his hand. I could smell the faint scent of children's shampoo on it. Masha's favorite, strawberry and mint. My chest ached. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly as the numbers climbed. "Yes, I did." He glanced at me. "It's been 6 years, Katya. 5 years and 11 months. I corrected before I could stop myself. The corner of his mouth twitched, the ghost of the smile that used to undo me. The doors opened onto the 42nd floor. The executive suite was flooded with light. Ivan Sokolov stood at the head of the long conference table, surrounded by the board. Men and women who had once shaken Dmitry's hand and called him brother. Sergei Malinov, the chief financial officer, looked pale. Elena Volkova, no relation, but the head of human resources, stared at her tablet as if it might save her. Sokolov smiled the same polished smile he had worn at the funeral. Dmitry, You received the notice. There was no need for drama. Dmitri set the backpack carefully on a chair. You locked me out of my own company on the night my daughter is waiting for me to pick her up from her grandmother's. Drama is the least of what you will face. Sokolov's smile did not reach his eyes. The board has lost confidence. Your emotional decisions after Irina's death, the time you spend away from the office, the refusal to expand into certain markets. We cannot continue this way. The company needs stability. Stability, Dmitri repeated. His voice remained low, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You mean the contracts you signed with your cousin's firm in Ekaterinburg? The ones that bled our research budget dry. The ones I discovered last week. A murmur ran through the board. Sergei's face went white. Sokolov's smile finally cracked. Those are standard. Those are theft, Dmitri said. And every one of you who voted tonight knew it. You thought a grieving widower with a small daughter would be easy to push aside. You were wrong. I stepped forward then, placing the folder I had carried under my coat onto the table. It was not the court order I had threatened. It was something better. Copies of the internal audits Anastasia had quietly gathered over the past month when she began to suspect the truth. Bank transfers, email chains, the quiet paper trail of a coup dressed in legal language. Mr. Sokolov, I said, under Russian corporate law, a board resolution obtained through material non-disclosure of conflicts of interest is voidable. These documents show a pattern of self-dealing that will interest both the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the shareholders you have not yet fully controlled. The room held its breath. Sokolov laughed once, sharp. And who are you to lecture us? I am the woman who will bury you in litigation until the only thing left of your reputation is a cautionary tale taught in business schools, I answered. And I am also the woman who still knows every entrance code, every emergency protocol, and every employee who has remained loyal to the man who built this company with his bare hands after his wife died. Dmitri looked at me then, really looked, and something in his face shifted. The controlled anger softened into something warmer, something that belonged to the nights we used to walk along the embankment talking about the future as if it were a gift we could still open together. What happened next unfolded with the strange, slow clarity of a dream. Dmitri did not raise his voice. He simply walked to the intercom on the wall and pressed the all-floor button. This is Dmitri Volkov, he said, and every speaker in the building carried his voice. Effective immediately, Ivan Sokolov is terminated for cause. Sergei Malinov, Elena Volkova, and every board member who voted in tonight's secret session are suspended pending investigation. Security, escort them from the premises. Any employee who wishes to leave with them may do so. Those who stay will find that loyalty is still remembered in this company. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the older security guard from the lobby appeared in the doorway, radio crackling, face grim with purpose. Sokolov began to shout about lawsuits and injunctions. Dmitri simply stood there, one hand resting on Masha's little backpack, as if the child herself were present to witness the reclaiming of her father's name. I watched the faces of the people who filed out. Some left with Sokolov, heads high, already calculating their next alliances. Most stayed. Lena from reception cried quietly into her hands. A young engineer from the research floor, a boy barely older than 25, stepped forward and said in a shaking voice, "We never stopped believing in you, Mr. Volkov." When the suite was finally quiet again, Dmitri sank into the chair at the head of the table, as if his bones had suddenly remembered how heavy they were. I remained standing, unsure whether to leave or stay. "You still carry the weight of everyone else's storms," he said after a long silence. "You always did. And you still try to carry them alone," I answered. He looked up. Rain still glistened in his hair. "Masha asks about you sometimes. She found an old photograph in a box last winter. The one from the lake near Paradelkino. She wanted to know why the woman with the red scarf never came back." My throat closed. That photograph. The day before everything broke. The day before Irina's diagnosis. Before the long hospital nights. Before Dmitri disappeared into the role of sole parent and grieving husband, and I convinced myself that the kindest thing I could do was step aside. "I didn't know how to stay," I whispered. "Not without making everything harder for you." He stood then, slowly, and crossed the space between us. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Moscow glittered under the rain, indifferent and eternal. Inside, the air between us felt fragile, charged, alive with every unsaid word of 5 years and 11 months. I never stopped needing you, Katya, he said. I just stopped knowing how to ask. The words landed like soft blows against the walls I had built. I thought of all the nights I had walked home alone after late meetings, pretending the empty space beside me was a choice rather than a wound. I thought of Masha's small hand in the photograph, reaching toward the camera as if she already understood that some people leave even when they do not want to. I still love you, I said, because the truth had waited long enough. I loved you when you married her. I loved you when you buried her. I loved you every day I stayed away so you could heal without the complication of me. And I love you now, standing in the ruins of a company you just set on fire to save. His hands rose, hesitated, then framed my face with a tenderness that undid the last of my careful distance. When he kissed me, it was not the frantic collision of youth. It was slower, deeper, a recognition that some loves survive even when they are not allowed to live in the open. We did not speak for a long time after that. We simply stood together in the quiet executive suite while the rain washed the city clean and the security teams below secured the floors. Later, when the first pale light of morning touched the river, Dmitri called his mother and asked her to keep Masha a little longer. Then he turned to me and said the words I had not dared hope to hear. Come home with me, not as a lawyer, not as a temporary ally. Come as the woman who never stopped being the center of every map I draw. I went. The apartment in the old Arbat district still smelled faintly of cedar and children's books. Toys lay scattered across the living room floor, a wooden train, a stuffed hare missing one ear, a half-finished drawing of a girl with a red scarf standing beside a tall man and a small child. My heart cracked open at the sight. Dmitri made tea the way he always had, strong and sweet, the steam rising between us like a truce. We talked until the city fully woke. We talked about Irina without flinching, about the terrible, beautiful years of learning to parent alone, about the nights he had almost called me and the nights I had almost knocked on his door. We talked about the company and the long fight still ahead, the lawsuits and the investigations and the rebuilding. And underneath every word ran the current of something larger. The possibility that the life we had once imagined might still be waiting, altered by time, but not destroyed. When Masha arrived that afternoon, small and solemn and carrying a backpack almost as large as she was, she looked at me with her father's gray eyes and said, "You're the lady from the photograph. Papa said you might come back one day if we were very patient." I knelt so we were eye to eye. "I am back," I told her, "and I am not leaving again unless you and your papa decide you want me to." She considered this with the gravity only children possess, then reached out and took my hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Will you stay for dinner?" Babushka made borscht, and I drew a picture of the three of us for the refrigerator. Dmitri watched from the doorway, something soft and wondering in his expression. For the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders seemed lighter. The company would demand everything in the weeks to come. The legal battles would be fierce. Trust would have to be rebuilt brick by careful brick. But standing in that modest kitchen with a child's hand in mine, and the man I had never stopped loving looking at me, as if I were the answer to a question he had carried alone for too long, I understood that some victories are quieter than boardroom revolutions. They begin with a single door that finally opens. That night, after Masha was asleep and the rain had stopped, Dmitri and I stood on the small balcony overlooking the quiet street. The air smelled of wet pavement and early spring. He slipped his arm around my waist, and I leaned into the solid warmth of him. "I fired half the board on the spot," he said, a faint smile touching his mouth. "Some of them deserved worse." "You did what was necessary," I answered. "And you did it without becoming the kind of man who destroys for the sake of power." He was silent for a moment. "Then stay. Not just tonight. Stay and help me build something better than what was stolen. Stay and let Masha learn that love can return even after it has been lost. Stay and let me learn how to stop carrying every storm alone." I turned in his arms and looked up at the man the rain had tried to wash away from his own life only hours earlier. The single father who had been denied entry to the empire he created. The man who had walked back in and rewritten the ending with nothing but truth and the quiet force of a heart that refused to quit. "I am already home," I said. And somewhere below us, in the living room of a modest Moscow apartment, A child's drawing of three figures holding hands waited on the refrigerator, ready for the morning light.